This is Right Side Radio with a polling update of the 2024 U.S. presidential election. Now let's get into it. In the first and only vice presidential contest, J.D. Vance wrecked Tim Walz as Kamala Harris keeps lagging behind in the polls with Trump blazing in the swing states. Democrats have a lot of work ahead of them. Walz did not achieve what he needed to do. Thus, as we reach the last month of the campaign, he and the vice president find themselves in a very unstable situation. I will also be revising my 2024 electoral map in this video to show you how the arithmetic has shifted for Trump and Harris following the debate. First, we will complete the solid states for both contenders. These are the ones where Harris or Trump will prevail by 15% or more, along with the 1st District of Maine. The vice president will be readily carrying Washington, California, Hawaii, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. Her electoral votes are thus just 109. Along with Iowa, a state he won by almost a double-digit margin, Trump is in Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except the 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, South Carolina, Alaska, and the 2nd District of Maine. With these safe states filled in for both contenders, Donald Trump then leads early with 132 electoral votes to Kamala Harris and Tim Walz's 109. The GOP will surely benefit from Vance's outstanding performance last night in terms of the widest margin of victory since the 1980s. Regarding the likely states, these are those in which either candidate will prevail by 7 to 15 points. Though one applicant will still have a small advantage, they will be notably more competitive. Starting with the presumably blue states, Oregon and Illinois, 2 states that went to Joe Biden by strong margins back in 2020, stand out. Kamala Harris simply isn't going to do as well as the current president. Oregon won by 16 points, Illinois by 17. Up in the Northeast, we then have Delaware, New York, and New Jersey, particularly in New York and New Jersey, where Democrats have been rather challenged. In New York, for example, their officials have simply been beset with controversy. Andrew Cuomo resigned from his gubernatorial post first in 2022. Thereafter, Kathy Hochul lost appeal. Drama caused her first lieutenant governor to resign, and then a few days ago, New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who is obviously a Democrat, was charged with corruption. And so, indeed, this has undermined Democratic support in the Empire State, not helping them either as Bob and Andy's in New Jersey. And so these 3 historically blue states, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware, are going to be far more competitive than they were 4 years ago. Joe Biden also won all 3 of them by 15% points or more. We now have Colorado last based on his almost 14-point margin in the previous contest by prevailed. I'm going to treat Harris with the benefit of the uncertainty. I have her barely over 7 points winning Colorado. It thus narrowly qualifies as a likely blue state. Still, Colorado is really liberal at this time. Making too much progress there will prove somewhat challenging for Trump. He will nevertheless most certainly do far better than he did in 2020. Now it's time for the probably red state where Trump is expected to prevail by 7% points or more. Ohio, a state won in each of the past 2 elections, will start our tour. He turned it around in 2016, really. In 2012, I visited Obama 3 points ahead. Then in 2020, everyone assumed Ohio would be much more competitive based on surveys showing he would only win by 1%. Ultimately, though, Trump. States, we have rather several of them, many of these found in the Sun Belt. I will start with Arizona, which has rapidly turned into the most conservative of the 8 swing states. Among those hot items is Virginia as well. After this point, you might even start to add Minnesota, but Arizona, out of all the states left, is likely going to vote to Trump by the big margin in the polls. He has been simply dominating. He has guided in all 10 of the state's most recent polls taken. The betting markets place his chances in Arizona higher than those in North Carolina and Georgia, and thus Kamala Harris, who won a state in the past election, is nearly losing it this time around with the former president on target to win by perhaps 3 to 4 points. Arizona will be lean red, moving east. We next have North Carolina, the sole swing state Trump visit in both 2016 and 2020. 4 points 8 years ago earned him it. 4 years later, he also won the state by somewhat over 1%. For Republicans, this was a quite unexpected turn of events, since according to most polls, they were going to lose the Tar Heel state totally. Nevertheless, Trump emerged with a triumph, and therefore today, he is on target to win North Carolina 3 times in succession. He is ruling the polls much as in Arizona. Mark Robinson will not assist Trump here, though most likely he will bring him down. However, Trump has performed really well in North Carolina during the 2 elections he is running already, and he will do great. He is once more winning by about 3% points. Georgia's next state to rank most competitive in 2020 is the lowest margin, just 0. 24% of the voters selected which of the 2 presidential candidates to choose. Still, Trump is clearly on course to bring Georgia back. Biden's triumph here in 2020 was the first one any Democrat had since 1992. Kamala Harris is not likely to create history once more. She simply isn't performing almost as effectively as Biden did in the previous election. Trump actually took home the Peach State by 5 points in 2016. Georgia remains, therefore, a primarily red state, and hence it will resurface in the GOP column at this point. And for Trump, North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona, 3 states are progressively becoming more and more dependable. Out of the remaining states, barring Nevada, he just has to win 1 more to secure the presidency, since he can essentially bank on the electoral votes of all 3 of these states, and most likely Pennsylvania is that state as well. Mostly everyone agrees that the Keystone State is the most crucial one for both sides. Should Trump secure Pennsylvania, he will be over 270. And Pennsylvania is pencil because indeed, Trump can surely win states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, maybe even Virginia, but he already will have won Pennsylvania by a bigger margin if he wins these states. Therefore, Pennsylvania is most likely the state that will get Trump over 270 electoral votes if he is to win the White House, retaking the lead in the polling averages. He is clearly favored to recover the Keystone State. In 2016, he earned 0. 72, this was a quite near margin. In 24 years, this was the first time a Republican took Pennsylvania. He then lost it just by over 1% in 2020 to Joe Biden. With Kamala Harris running far worse than Biden and Clinton were in the polling at this point in 2020 and 2016, Pennsylvania is going to flip-flop back to the GOP today. Wisconsin would be our one last lean state. Following that wall fiasco of a debate, he will damage Harris now in Wisconsin for some time, given that Pennsylvania is the governor of Minnesota and the 2 states have a quite long border. People assumed Pennsylvania would vote to the right of Wisconsin simply because fences would help the vice president in Wisconsin. At this moment, though, it doesn't seem as though walls are supporting Harris sufficiently. Trump's margin of victory in Wisconsin will be lean. He will carry it by rather over 2 points. Actually, Trump has performed really brilliantly in Wisconsin during the past 2 election cycles. In 2016, he prevailed with 76%, but then he should have lost the state by 8 points when he lost it in 2020. His loss was just 0.6. On today's polls, Trump and Harris tie, which is quite favorable for the Trump campaign. And even if Biden prevailed in 2020, his margin of victory, 0.6, is less than that of Trump's from 40 years ago. We now only have 4 states remaining. 2% points or fewer will define these tilt situations. First, I will clear the 2nd District of Nebraska from the path. Its hue will be tilt blue, but then Trump can turn around and travel to Nevada. Since George Shelby Bush in 2004, no Republican has carried Nevada. Hence, this is a state he has never experienced. Nevada is turning right now, though. Hillary Clinton carried the state by 2.4% in 2016. Joe Biden won it by exactly the same percentage in 2020. Rising off of Clinton's edge in practically every other state, Biden only performed worse than Clinton in 5 states, and Republicans will be running for governorship here in 2022. Another obvious indication Nevada is turning toward the GOP is that Trump has a very strong possibility of a first-time Republican victory in the state this November. 20 years have seen the last state the former president will then be visiting is the Wolverine state of Michigan, which he won back in 2016 over Hillary Clinton by a 0.2% margin. He gave Biden 2.8 points. However, he is on target to reclaim it this time. Polling in Michigan 4 years ago greatly understated support for Trump. His expected loss of the state was 7 points. He lost it finally by less than 3, and now polls conducted in Michigan are essentially tied, just like in Wisconsin. And you can be somewhat sure that Trump will prevail when the polls are close-knit, and thus the last red state on the map is Michigan. The previous president will be favored in tilt, and now we have Virginia and Minnesota as left before Joe Biden pulled out. Virginia has always been rather competitive this election cycle. Based on the polling average, he was en route to lose the state totally, and Kamala Harris isn't actually doing that much better now. Her leading on many polls is merely 3 points. Still, I can imagine Harris scraping out a meager victory, given Joe Biden took the state by 10 points in the previous contest. Tim West's performance in Minnesota will also not be very beneficial for him here. Minnesota will remain competitive always. Should Woles not be the Democratic vice presidential candidate, Trump most likely would be preferred in the state. Woles remains the governor, though obviously less than he was intending to give her before this discussion. He is still going to provide Harris a boost, and thus Minnesota, the last state on the map, will be tilt blue. Hillary Clinton's 1.5% victory will make it equally competitive as it was in 2016. Nobody expected it to get that close. And so Trump has 312 electoral votes after the first and most likely only advanced Wolves debate. Harris comes at only 226. Trump is winning in Wisconsin while Minnesota gets more and more competitive. I really appreciate you folks watching right now. Make sure you enjoy, comment, and subscribe for more material like this heading up to the November election.